I just wanted to give you 2 minutes of context, the history of Unit 3, and some of the great gains that this union has made for and with Unit 3 members. Talk about some of the gains toward parity that have been made prior to the union and then after, and then sort of debunk some of the employer's logic, so that if you hear this idea that maybe Unit 3 shouldn't be in the union or they're not as important and they don't deserve parity, that you'll have some talking points. Unit 3 parity has had a sort of long history. The first Unit 3 drives for GAs and RAs were in the 70s, and they were sort of 3 times defeated. Labor boards found that graduate assistants weren't workers, and if they were workers, that they weren't fundamental enough to the operation of the university to be in the union. And through the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, Unit 3, or GA work was sort of a dumping ground for people that the employer wanted to give funding to or wanted to extract some labor from. And they had them doing all types of things, really valuable research. And then you hear the stories about doing laundry, watering plants in FES, doing photocopying and all this kind of stuff. In 99-2000, Unit 3 was voluntarily recognized by the employer because it was very clear that the members in Unit 3 were doing real work. And it wasn't so much the research work that I think they should primarily be known for. It was more sort of administrative work that was being taken out of the staff association local and being given to graduate assistants to sort of make work projects. So the union was organized, or the unit was organized, and then it had its first bargaining round. And in that time, the first contract was really not that great for Unit 3 members. It set a very low minimum of wages, below what most Unit 3 members were already getting paid, below $8,000. It's at very basic tuition rebate at about $30 a term for just the fall-winter. Employer contributions to the GSA benefits plan, but they weren't in our benefits plan. Didn't have access to all the funds that other union members had. And over the years, first during the strike, and then in 2002, and then in 2005, we moved slowly toward parity in some areas. The tuition rebate and access to funds like the Ways and Means Fund and childcare. 3 years ago, the creation of the GASA, a new summer assistance program. And as such, we actually saw the sort of expansion of Unit 3, right? I myself was only able to come to grad school because of the existence of Unit 3, having access to benefits and having slightly higher wages or much higher wages than I would have had if there hadn't been a union, and then slowly being able to stay in the union because I had tuition rebates and so on. And it made a huge difference for me. But the work I was doing, I felt that it was unfair that I was being paid $8,000 while TAs, for example, were being paid at that time around $11,000. We were doing the same hours of work. The research I was doing was very valuable. I was preparing research and notes for conferences for the faculty member I was working for. I spent endless hours and weeks and months doing research in libraries by myself, sort of isolated from my colleagues. It was different work than TA work, but it was incredibly valuable to one of the 2 fundamental aspects of the mission of the university, which is research. In 2007, we again fought to get research assistants into Unit 3. And again, we were told by the employer, research assistants aren't real workers, and if they are, the work that they do is purely for their benefit. We as the employer extract no benefit from these workers. And the labor board found that might not be true, that there might be value that's extracted, and ultimately we negotiated to get RAs into the union. Since then, we've seen Unit 3 sort of expand, and one of the ways it's expanded is with graduate enrollments increasing, the employer has given what would have been Unit 1 members, TAs, have been giving them Unit 3 positions, right? Which have, again, less pay, some fewer benefits, until this round, some fewer access to funds, less summer assistance, and so on. So that's one of the reasons that it's really important that the local has fought for parity, is that the unit has constantly expanded. The workers in the unit are doing more and more work for the university. There's a more diverse group of people in the bargaining unit. And if we don't bring Unit 3 up to parity, Unit 3 can be what it always was for the employer, just a dumping ground. Some work to give people who they didn't want to fully fund, right? And not fully pay benefits for, and tuition rebates and so on. So as that happens, and as graduate enrollment continues to increase, we're going to see the growth of Unit 3 even more, right? And it's going to be a dumping ground like it has been unless we bring the wages and the summer funding and so on up to parity. So we need to actually protect the entire union by bringing up the very bottom. But there's also been an accessibility issue where most GAs are obviously master's students. That's the entry point into grad school. You know, many people can survive a little bit better on what they get as Unit 1 members, but if you can't even start your master's because you can't live on a Unit 3 position on you know, $80, $800 and fewer tuition rebates and no summer funding, then you'll never get to that PhD. You'll never get into Unit 1, and then if you're lucky, into Unit 2. So from the standpoint of accessibility of education across the province, it's important. Finally, I mean, I work at McMaster, and we have research assistants, and we look to the Unit 3 contract as a template, as the best example of what's possible for graduate and research assistants at the master's level and at the PhD level. So when you actually fight for parity for Unit 3, you fight for an improvement across the entire province and the entire country for what master's level and in general just grad students will have access to there. What you win here really is won, or is possible to be won elsewhere. So just the last two things. The way the employer has crushed Unit 3 in the past is by saying the work is less valuable and the people have less need. And I just want to focus on the idea of the need. Unit 3 members, master's students and PhD students, they pay the exact same tuition, including through the summer when they have no summer funding. They have the same bills living in Toronto, rent and so on. Despite what the employer says, they do sometimes have children and they do have childcare costs. They do need to access you know, benefits and go to the dentist. They do go to conferences. They do experience tragedies and need to access the Ways and Means Fund, and so on and so on and so on. They're the same people and they have the same needs as members of Unit 1 and to some extent members of Unit 2, although obviously Unit 2 members have a whole additional host of challenges and so on. So they definitely don't have less need. They also pay the same UHIP fees and so on. And they need the same basic protections in terms of leaves and so on that other members have. So there had been a lot of progress in this round toward parity, and you're actually really close in a lot of ways. The one main way that you're not close to parity is in wages and in minimum guarantee. What people don't realize, because there's been talk of closing the gap between Unit 3 and Unit 1, is that the gap has actually increased. Despite our talk about parity, Unit 3 members make less of a percentage of wages than Unit 1 members compared to 8-9 years ago when they first certified. So there's big improvements to be made. The way that can be done is through setting minimum guaranteed levels of funding, just like in Unit 1. When those minimum guarantees happened in '96, around the creation of summer fees and the elimination of post-residency fees, the employer said, kind of, no way, it's impossible, and then eventually they said, okay, if we need to attract the best and the brightest, if people are going to actually finish, if we're going to get the funding from the government, we need to make being here livable for the people who are here. They don't maybe care about Unit 3 members as workers as much as they should, but they care about master's students as students. So it's important to understand that the union has been the main force for good for master's students and for Unit 3 members. They've actually done what the employer should have done and won full access to UHIP at 100%, full access to benefits. The next step is actually creating a minimum guarantee that not only ameliorates the gap between Unit 3 and Unit 1, but also the gap that's increasing within Unit 3, where we have some people at 14,000 of wages and some people at 10. That's the work that unfortunately maybe won't be addressed in this round, despite everyone's best efforts, but it needs to continue. And I think next round you can actually win it. I hope it's one of the #1 priorities, is actual parity finally after 35 years from the first attempt in 1975. You can do it, you're poised to do it. In that sense, whatever happens in the next few days, it's been a huge victory for the union, for Unit 3, who turned down the contract at 70%, but for the whole union, which will benefit from having a stronger Unit 3, who are more knowledgeable about this history and so on. So know this history, tell it to members who think Unit 3 members are less valuable, tell it to the employer, say it in the bargaining meetings in 2, hopefully, maybe sadly 3 years, and just talk about the struggles and talk about what's possible based on what you've already won. So I guess that's all I wanted to say.